Welcome, welcome, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Satsang with G. Let me get the screen placed a little bit better here so that it's a little bit more, in the center. Turn off the sound over there. Oh, it actually is in the center. When I look at it on the screen, it's hard to get it right. It's actually hard to get the framing perfectly. So, hello everyone. Welcome once again. Welcome to your weekly journey into inner space. It's a marvelous gift, really. I'm often blown away at just the remarkable outpouring and explosion of conscious awareness that I've been experiencing over decades now. That it just seems to be gaining momentum. There's a shift taking place in human consciousness that I think is, well, the only thing I can call is the eschaton, the end of history, the end of time, the end of days. We're not talking about the huge calamity or the end of the world kind of scenario, but it is. I think that what is approaching humanity is a transformation as dramatic as the transformation of the fish going up on the land. It is. I think it's that significant, what's happening, which I think is also the reason why there's so much inertia against it. We want to point fingers at certain evil people and evil systems and the like, and there's plenty of that. There's plenty of that out there to to point your finger at. But they only rest upon, some people only become violent, or they become really aggressive, they become conquerors, because there's something deeply lacking within their souls, something that has disconnected them from the capacity to empathize, to feel, literally feel the suffering and pain of others. If you've suffered in your life, and who hasn't, you can see it either as a gift or as a curse. You can spend your life trying to get out of it, or you can use it as an opportunity to examine ourselves in a brutally honest way, actually. Our suffering is all caused by the attachment we have to things. The thing we don't want to change. We think that spirituality and self-help and personal development and success is all about having some kind of great material utopia. Well, that's impossible. It's simply impossible, for the simple reason that my version of a utopia and somebody else's version of a utopia are almost certain to be very, very different. The CEO that doesn't want to get up in the morning unless it makes him a buck, is his idea of heaven and my idea of heaven are very different. And so with this level of disconnect between values, between ideals, between connections of the heart, how could you possibly have any kind of a utopian or even a well-organized agreement on anything? They get enforced, right, through force, often through violence, through threats, through fear, and the like. And so we end up just struggling. But struggling with what? I think what the world is lacking is the willingness to examine itself closely and carefully. The willingness to go in to those deep, dark spaces inside of us. You know, in the traditional mythologies of the various of the hero's journey, which is, you know, the ultimate mythology, it appears absolutely everywhere, in different forms. Everything from, you know, Luke Skywalker to Ulysses, to Buddha, to Christ. They're all hero stories, and one of the significant things about them is there's always a fall out of the way things are, the life as it is. The life you've grown used to, the one you're comfortable within, the one you want to just go on forever, something wrenches you out of that, and you end up plummeting. It can be into the middle of a mountain. You can be into the depths of an ocean in traditional myths. These days, it's off into outer space where there's absolutely nothing. And what you encounter are the demons, the monsters, the resistances of your own unconscious being. And by unconscious, I don't mean it's like this mysterious thing that's different from you. I mean, it's just all the things that you've been thinking and believing for so long that you don't even know you are. You're acting them out. And so I just feel very deeply that in Satsang, we take the time to actually explore these things. What is it? What do we actually believe about ourselves, about the world, about what's true, about what's not? Where are our expectations that aren't really aligned with our highest being, with our highest aspirations? Where is it we're really just looking for an air conditioner in hell, and not an actual path outward to heaven? These are difficult things for us to face, and quite frankly, if I hadn't had so many failures and sufferings in my life, I probably wouldn't. Like anybody else, I'd take the easy path. But life was kind enough to me to kick my ass around the block as often as I needed it. And interestingly enough, that's always referred to in the mythologies as the trickster god, the Hermes, the coyote in Native American. Something that always, just as you think you got it all together, that boiling hot soup gets dumped on your lap. And I've become grateful for that. Paul used to talk about the thorn in his side. It wasn't literally a thorn in his side. It was this. It was this constant reminder. It's as if you need your egoic tendencies. We need our conditioning to poke us and prod us and remind us that, it ain't over till it's over. I have enormous hopes for humanity. I have enormous hope that we're going to get through this, and a wholly different, a wholly new human being is going to emerge on the other side. I'm not even sure if the word human being is going to be appropriate anymore. That it is going to emerge, but it's going to look as if it's not going to emerge. In the Hindu mythology about the various yugas, that the shortest and the worst, the darkest, is the Kali Yuga, which we are in according to their cycle. And in this cycle, which is really the dream of Vishnu, the landscape gets so bleak that it looks as if the light is going to be put out. It looks like it is going to be smothered. That it's going to get to that point. But it can't be put out. That's the nature of life. You can't make the truth false, and you can't make the false true. It doesn't matter how many phony baloney news programs are on trying to create a narrative that people will buy. You cannot obscure the truth. But the truth is not the validity or importance of one system over another system. It is in who are we. Somehow we have to become reconnected to the transcendent, to the essence of ourselves. It's almost like we're a tree that has been cut off at the trunk, and we're still trying to grow even though we have no roots. We're just kind of floating. Anyway, I could go on about this all day, and sometimes I do. Please like and share. I've noticed a couple of thumbs up. It's very helpful. So let's get back. Let's get to the real reason we're here. I have my computer next to me so I can read the questions. Hello, Brian in Virginia. Good to have you, Brian. Sarah. Hi, Sarah. Hi, G. Thrilled and grateful to be here with you all. You look and sound great. Much love, Sarah from France. Thank you. Thank you. I feel good. David Rose. Good afternoon, GP. Good to be here. Good to have you, David. Daryl. Good afternoon from DC in Maryland. Wouter Oosting. Hi, G. Hi, Wouter. Ursula. Hello, all from Madeira Island. David Elaine. My good buddies in south of England. Cannot believe the last song was a week ago. Seems like yesterday. This time stuff can really mess with your mind. Yes, it can. Yeah, that's because it doesn't actually exist. Time is something we made up. It's a convention. It's a useful tool, but it doesn't actually exist as a thing. There's no like river of time flowing. Carrie Brogan, morning G. Good morning, Carrie and Hoffman. Good to be here from Georgia. A highlight of my Sunday. Wonderful. For me as well. Daryl Sanders, but GP, isn't everything that happens in the God's manifestation good, bad, evil? It's all God. Thank you for asking that. And you know, I think the essential creative tension that drives our spiritual inquiry, as it has driven human beings. You know, there was a point in human history, the whole way life has functioned, which is, life eating life, surviving, one life survives on the death of another, was going on for millions of years until human consciousness got to the point, happened and got to the point where it could look and be completely mystified by it. To look at, and it has been the theme throughout all religion and mythology, trying to come to terms with something that is inherently violent, inherently self-consuming. They found they call them the bear caves, the clan of the cave bear kind of thing, they're the first examples, very, very old, of ritualistic burials. And they would bury the bear. They were killing the bears for some reason, for food maybe, I really don't know. That not really clear, but they put them in caves, the skulls in caves. It was very ritually done. It was not just happenstance. They were set up the way they're, and the bear skull usually had some kind of like a femur, like a leg bone in the mouth back through the head. It's apparent that what it represented was their utter being mystified by life eating life. And it was just an example of it eating itself, which is what life does. Unless we're willing to actually, with an open eye, look at it, at life that way, we haven't really confronted the essential motivation and mystery that drives us to find what is the true meaning of all this, what is the truth of all this. So yes, on one hand you can say it's all just a manifestation of God, but it's not very satisfying, isn't it? Is it? Just say it's a manifestation of, this is the way it is, this is Vishnu's dream, this is the way, and yeah, it's true, but it's not very satisfying, is it? Because there's something else very much alive in us, compassion. It's, the philosopher Schopenhauer made that point of the person who's willing to, for no self-gain whatsoever, completely contrary to the normal nature of what we regard as life, somebody will give up their life. They will put themselves in enormous danger in order to to save somebody else, even though there's nothing for them to get out of it. There was a story of two men, I think there were two policemen, saw this young man who was about to jump off a bridge, some bridge that was very popular for people jumping off, I guess. And they approached him, right? And as they approached him, the guy jumped. Well, one of the policemen grabbed him and started to go over with him. And if the other policeman hadn't grabbed him, he would have gone with him. And they asked him later, why did you do that? He said, I don't know. I just could not let that boy go. Now that is a level of compassion and altruism and heart space that is completely contrary to the simple, I'm hungry, I got to eat you. The rituals that would be performed in honoring of the animals that were killed in order to be fed were an attempt to be with this mystery. But I think this is where we have to go. That there's this enormous conflict between our everyday life, that what we actually have to do in order to survive, and this open-hearted space of total self-sacrifice and forgiveness. Somehow we have to reconcile these two. And I think a willingness to truly do that, right? And not just gloss it over with some, philosophical statement, well, this is all God's will, or, this is all Vishnu's dream, or, this is the way it's got to be. But to actually throw yourself in the middle of the mystery of that, I think is really the real birth of spiritual life, because you begin to question, why is everything the way it is? Including the fact that it's impossible for me to accept that it needs to be this way. That something inside of me is willing to simply sacrifice itself for the benefit of a complete stranger. And this is a phenomena that is not explained by our psychology, it's not explained by anatomy, it's not explained by biology. It's best covered in the myths and religious traditions and religious rituals, trying to come to terms with it. So while on one hand I would say you're absolutely right, good, bad, evil, it's all God, but the place we get to that is beyond good and evil, that is truly transcendent, can't just ignore that our own revulsion at the way life functions. Now, interestingly enough, we do sit at a time where we have the technological know-how to mitigate this to a large degree. Nobody can completely remove themselves from it, but to a large degree, and yet we don't. I don't think we've really come to the actual willing participation in this great, wondrous, and horrific mystery that we all find ourselves in. So I don't want to just take an answer like that, because it's easy. And non-dualists would say, well, none of it's real, it's all an illusion, nothing's happening. And that's true, but I personally, and anybody with a heart, doesn't find that particularly satisfying. I think there's something deeper to the transcendence. I think there's something deeper that this mysterious weirdness that is life is pushing us towards. And I think it's the only way we can get there. I think we have to embrace life as it is before we can transcend it. We can't use this as an excuse to just avoid the cruelty we live with every day. I don't eat meat, and I don't eat meat because I'm just completely horrified at the circumstances under which it happens, the effect that it has on people, it has on the planet, of course the animals themselves. The whole thing I just find to be reprehensible, and I don't need to participate in it. I don't have to have it. So I don't. Right? And that's a moral choice that I've made. And people say, yeah, well, you got to eat meat. I got the canines for chewing it. And it's like, yeah, I can't deny it. I can't deny it, but I can't participate in it. That's simply a matter of conscience. Now that doesn't really make any sense when you just look at life, and this is the way it's been, and this is the way it's been for forever. And other than human beings, the only one to even question it, right? I cannot say you're wrong. I'm speaking from another place altogether that to me is equally real, and guides me to make those decisions even when they appear to be contrary to nature. So I could talk about this more, but I think I'll just kind of let it go with that. Whenever we run into things that seem completely incompatible, completely irreconcilable, to me that's the place we want to plant ourselves, because that the mystery isn't there. The deeper transcendence, the deeper questions and the deeper answers have to be in there, in the places that do not seem to be reconcilable. So, thank you for that, Daryl. Hi from Sweden, from Emiliano. Hello, Emiliano. My buddy Eva. Namaste, Duji, everybody. Hi from Poland. Really, we all meet here in our inner space, and that's the great event. It's true. It is. It is a great event. It's. I have to say, as somebody who encountered this kind of spiritual teaching very early on, relatively early on. It's been around, obviously, for thousands of years. But here in the West, where it began to emerge, I have been overwhelmed with how the dramatic increase in interest in non-duality, a subject that seems for many arcane. I got some criticisms on one of my videos. Somebody's going, "You guys, you just confused me." It's like, I try to engage in a Q&A, but not really having it. It just, it is confusing. It is confusing. It's going to be confusing to take a long, hard look at assumptions that have been so deeply ingrained in us and in our culture and in our families and in our history that we don't even know they're assumptions. We have to find a whole criteria by which we can assess them. And for me, the criteria, as radical as it is the model of the universe as being consciousness, not matter. That what we call matter is, what's a dream made of? In your dreams, there are pictures, there are people, there are things, but what are they made of? There's no people there, there's no picture, there are trees, right? What is it made of? Well, it's made of mind. You realize, it's such a mind blower, but we don't ponder it enough to actually give it credence and kind of milk it for all it's worth. And if you look at the actual neurology of the brain and of perception, you never actually see anything out here. Everything you are seeing is in here. Right? A good analogy is just sound. The signal path of sound. You've heard me say this before, but really think through it. My mouth is putting a vibration into the air. It's being picked up by the microphone over there. There's a little diaphragm or something in there that vibrates in sympathy with that. And then there's electronics that convert it into an electronic signal that is a representation of what I just said. And it goes down the wires and it gets amplified and then goes over some other wires. And then it comes out the other side, out your speakers or your earbuds or whatever. But now the same thing happens. That now the wave is back in the air. It goes and vibrates your ear, and the whole thing follows until somewhere in the dark recesses of this little 3-pound blob of meatloaf, there's a a hearing. Something hears this. Now, I've looked at it every which way from Sunday, and I just cannot find any way to explain that with the brain as a model. The fact of the matter is that what you see out there, you are not seeing out there. It is a whole bunch of stuff that's happening that is creating a picture in the brain, the mind, and it's that which you are seeing. So none of it is out there in terms of your actual experience. It is all a picture. So when you're talking about this tree you're looking at, what is that tree made of? It's made of you. It is made of the brain. It is made of mind. You take the brain out of the picture too, because what's the brain? Well, that's just another image, isn't it? We're looking for some place to put a stake in the ground and say, this is where we are, this is who I am. But if you look really closely at that image, I always come back to, well, who's looking at that image? That image that is just nothing but thought, right? That's all it is, an image in the mind, and it's being beheld. Well, if it's being beheld by something, is there another mechanism so it can see it? It's like a drive-in movie or something? The more I look at it, the more I cannot find any explanation that satisfies me other than the consciousness that is perceiving is not in the brain. It exists separately from it. It perceives everything there, but it itself is not any kind of a material structure. Look for yourself. Look and see. It's a little bit disconcerting. It's a little bit uncomfortable because we're not used to doing that. We just kind of take the model that this is the brain and it's a good representation of what is out there. But it is just a representation, and it's all in here. It's all in this inner space. And it's even dark. What's the light of that image that you see in your brain? It's dark in there. There's no openings for light. This is the level of conversation and inquiry I highly recommend to everyone. Personally, I find it enormously satisfying. I find it enormously engaging and inspiring and revealing, because we live our lives based on our beliefs and our assumptions. There's no way around it. That's whatever you believe to be true, you are going to act out, and therefore you are going to experience it as true. So what is it you're believing? Yeah. Oh, let's see what else we got here. Hello from New York's Upper West Side. Hello, Sundance. I lived in New York for many years. Whereabouts on the Upper West Side? John, question. I make a sound every time I meditate, similar to a short laughter. What is that about, and how should I relate to it? Well, if it's just a sound that's spontaneously arising within you, well, by all means, just use that as part of your meditation. Use that as a focus of attention. Become aware of that which is aware of that sound arising. Because you know that a sound can't arise if there's not an ear to hear it. If there's not somebody there to listen, there's no sound. The Zen koan, if a tree falls in the wood and there's nobody there to hear it, does it make a sound? Well, the answer is no, it doesn't. Waves in the air, but it's not a sound until it is heard. That's the unit. They arise together. The voice, the voice and the ear. So if it's something that's just spontaneously arising, you don't have to make sense out of it. It doesn't have to have meaning. It's just a spontaneous arising within the system, within the nature of life itself. And who knows? You may just be hearing the primeval Om, right? Which is basically the first manifestation. Om is the I am, that which has come into being out of the vast emptiness that is the ultimate transcendent reality. So if there is meaning to it, or something in there, a message for you or something, you don't need to figure that out with your mind. You don't have to analyze it and then create a story about what it means. Just ask it. There's this there. What do you have to say to me? Talk to it. Right? Engage with it as if there was, that was another human being, like you'd be engaging with me or a friend or something, right? So don't treat it as just some kind of a weird phenomena. Treat it as if it is some kind of a manifestation of life itself, because in a sense it is. Everything is. Everything is a manifestation of life, whether that be an inanimate object or a very animate object. They're all manifestations of the same essence, and therefore it is made of the same substance as you are. And we are all made of that same unknowable substance that is simply being itself. So is that an answer for you, John? Does that help? Let it lead you. Let yourself be engaged in the mystery. I mean, it's a mystery that anything exists at all. I mean, don't you think? I mean, there's no reason why any of this had to be here, right? But it is. There's a point at which we simply have to surrender to what is, recognizing that there's no way of knowing why. There isn't even a why. Because what is must have been eternally being, which means it didn't have an originating point, which means it didn't have a cause, which means it didn't have a purpose, it didn't have meaning. It just is. That's so difficult for our minds to grasp, because our minds are dualistic in nature. It's always describing one thing in terms of another, sequence and cause and effect and all of that, trying to make sense of it all. But that which simply is, eternally so, the truth, reality, well, if it just is, it means it has always been, which means it didn't have a cause, didn't have a beginning, it didn't have something bringing it into existence for some purpose. It just is. Meditate on that. Maybe the you're hearing just is. Maybe that's just the sound the universe feels like making, and you get to be an audience of one for it. But let it guide you into the essential wonder of it. Not see it as some kind of problem that has to be fixed. That's the egoic mind. Everything's a problem that has to be fixed. It doesn't want to run out of problems, by the way, right? Because if it's dedicated to solving problems, the last thing the ego wants is for there not to be a problem. I mean, if it defines itself in terms of conflict, it's got to make conflicts, doesn't it? So don't be in conflict with it. It's got a life. It's got an existence. It's got a destiny, right? Because it is temporary. It came from somewhere. It's going to go back somewhere. You use it as a focal point of meditation to penetrate this dark, empty space that we don't want to go into. Go into it. Dive into it. What do you got to lose except misery and suffering? David and Elaine. Continuing from last week, is it true to say that the suffering or anything which is seen does not taint the consciousness by which it is known? In the same way, the images of a movie do not affect the screen on which it is projected. So disturbances can arise and affect the body-mind, but not consciousness. Consciousness? Question mark. Thank you. Yes, quite. Yeah, I mean, a galaxy can explode, but space remains unaffected. Doesn't even leave a trace, right? That can sound kind of harsh, right? Because I don't want a galaxy exploding, especially this one. If only looked at from a very limited perspective. But consciousness is really the field in which it all happens. And so, no. And make it very practical. Just look at your own life. Throughout your entire life, there's been one experience after another, multiple experiences at the same time. some short ones, long ones, big ones, important ones, insignificant ones, but it's been this constant flow of experience that you didn't turn on and you can't turn off. But now look very, very closely at it. That there's always been two elements to it. There's been the experience itself, and the experiencing of it. The quality of knowingness or awareness. Now, while the experience has constantly been changing, going over and over and over again, the awareness of it has remained completely the same, hasn't it? That awareness of it has remained unchanged. This is your actual everyday experience. So it has not been touched by the experience. And the analogy of the screen not being the least bit affected by the fire on it, or the bomb going off, or the flood, or whatever it is, it has not been. As a matter of fact, you could take it even further. The screen of the movie where the image is being projected on it, you see it doesn't affect the screen. But look at the image of the computer that you're looking at right now. You're looking at me. Simultaneously, you're looking at the screen. They're not two. The image on the screen isn't on it at all. It is the screen. It is the functioning of the screen. The screen in its empty state is just blank. There's nothing there except the potential for absolutely anything. But then when it's in its active mode, you've got movies, you've got romantic comedies and love stories, you've got tragedies, you've got a Shakespeare play where there's dead bodies everywhere at the end of it. And then another thing pops up on exactly the same screen, and you can just click through all of them. The analogy is, the metaphor is very poignant. And that is, it's not something coming to consciousness, it is consciousness. The image on the screen is not on the screen, it is the screen. And then we have the story of the character trying to find his origin, searching all over the world, looking for the origin of its existence. The spiritual seeker, not realizing that the entire scene of the spiritual seeker is being perceived by the awareness that it's seeking. That's the cosmic joke. It is the screen. And it always has been. So the screen remains untouched by what it is producing. But as you can see, they are not two. It's not that there's our normal way of thinking, and in the beginning, the neti approach, as I talked about last week, the twofold approach. In the beginning, you completely disidentify with absolutely everything. Right? I am not that. I'm not that. I'm not that. I'm not my thoughts. I'm not my body. I'm not my feelings. I'm not my perceptions. I am not my memories. I am not my associations. So that you can finally establish yourself in a place that has no reference other than you. Right? So it's just pure you and nothing else. But all this is still here. Right? So you get to know awareness purely as awareness. But awareness is filled, it's peopled with all sorts of things, right? Well, what are they? Well, the more you examine them, you find that there's nothing but awareness. So they must be awareness. Everything you experience, everything you see, everything you feel, everything you taste is appearing in, of, and is made of awareness. That's the only conclusion you can come to. There's not some place out there manufacturing objects and sticking them in your head. A thought, isn't waiting off stage for its cue and then hops in. It appears spontaneously out of nowhere. We have no experience of its existence before that or after it leaves this stage, which means it is being produced by awareness. It is awareness in its dynamic aspect. Not sure where I got off on that. Did I answer your question, Dave? Did I answer it? The most important right, consciousness as the ultimate witness, the ultimate perceiver, is unaffected by that which it is conscious of, even recognizing that what it is conscious of is nothing other than itself. Consciousness, it still remains unaffected. But the more you see that, the more benevolent and compassionate you become, and the less fear there is, because it's like being afraid of a dream. Only when you don't know it's a dream are you afraid of it. Astric Star. Astric from Canada, hello. Hello, Astric. Don't recognize that name. Is this your first time here? Let's see. Carrie. Hi, Carrie. Hi, GP. Thanks for your presence. Are you familiar with the Enneagram? If so, can you say how to help a person entrenched in her beliefs and depression? I'm familiar with it. I'm certainly not familiar enough to, actually give a talk about it or how to use it as a tool. I mean, it's a mystical, mythological tool to map areas of consciousness that are outside what we can normally grasp. But I would say help a person entrenched in her beliefs and depression. Being entrenched, the only way you can be entrenched in a belief is if you've been more just trying to push things away rather than understand. A belief can only persist and be entrenched as long as it is not challenged as a belief. It's only entrenched when it's not seen as a belief, but regarded as true. It's a kind of an unspoken assumption, a tacit agreement, you might say. So I always urge people to be ruthlessly inquisitive about the nature of the beliefs. And if you're experiencing depression and other forms of suffering, that's the motivator to challenge these beliefs. Because what happens, a belief gets in place, it gets embedded in the nervous system, it starts being acted out, it becomes, you call it unconscious, it goes to another level where it is no longer a conscious choice or activity, it's just automatic behavior in the nervous system. If that belief is extremely limiting in there, and they all are to some degree, right, to a greater or lesser extent, it can really so severely cut you off from the energy and dynamism of life that depression arises, because you simply don't have the energy or the motivation or anything to make anything in your life work. But that's only because the trauma you experienced when you're young was so severe that even the attempt to even think about something that might be meaningful to you was cut off. The end result is such a feeling of powerlessness that we just kind of withdraw. And depression is the absence of motivation. It's the absence of energy. It's the absence of creativity and curiosity. What's the cure? Become curious about the depression. Become curious about the entrenched beliefs. How did they become entrenched? I mean, that's what brought me to this. I had to become curious about those things, even after I'd had a major awakening that showed me the absolute innocence and perfection and made me feel loved for the first time in my life. Even after that, I had a long path to hoe of challenging these entrenched beliefs and not going back or not creating new ones that would just bind me the same way. I'd have ups and downs and bouts of depression. I'd find a resiliency. because life was just absolutely insistent that there was not going to be a discount. There was not going to be it was not going to be made easy for me. That this had to be done, and I don't want to make it sound like it's a chore. It only becomes a chore when we're overcoming, when we're trying to see through beliefs so that we can get something else. They become a means to an end rather than an existential inquiry. Where did this come from? Why do I believe this? Why am I in pain? Why am I suffering? Okay. Now, of course, we want to get out of suffering. But if the only thing we're trying to do is alleviate suffering, we're very easy for us to be distracted, shut down, get depressed, try, one of the many things that we can get addicted to. But if this curiosity begins to grow, because you see it as more than just, it's not just you, my dear, it is everybody. This is the human condition you're experiencing. You're experiencing an aspect of it that may be more severe than others do. Or maybe not. Maybe other people have just been able to bury that enough to settle and eke out a little joy in life. Well, most of the time, as David Thoreau said, or Henry David Thoreau said, to lead a life of quiet desperation. And that is most people's life. Most people, maybe they don't have the same kind of struggles. The energy hasn't been completely shut down like in depression. But look around the world. Look around at the cruelty. Look at around. Just get on Facebook anytime and look at people arguing with each other and calling each other names. There is an enormous amount of pain and insecurity and fear that is surfacing in all of us. So I invite you to use every moment of suffering as a meditation, as a reminder. Buddha said it, life is suffering. But there was a cause to suffering and there was an end to suffering. But we need to know the cause and how to end it. But in order to do that, we can't just try to gloss over it or push it away or put some nice, cute little spiritual teaching on top of it. We have to dig in. We have to be like the hero on the hero's journey. We have to fall off the cliff. We have to plunge to the bottom of the ocean. And a lot of these myths, they actually die. They might get all cut and chopped up and then put back together again before they make the return with the treasure that they found at the bottom of the sea. These are beautiful metaphors for what we all need to do. It is a spiritual journey of the first order. Our modern world, modern psychology, and even in religion, most spiritual teachings have turned it into just basically self-help, self-improvement. Well, we can overcome this problem, you'll be happy and get everything that you want, completely ignorant of the deep existential questions that lie underneath the surface. That's what I'm interested in. I've played enough around on the superficial stuff. We all have. For lifetimes, we've done it. For lifetimes, we have squandered our lives on the trivial. And the only reason you're sitting in a place like Satsang is that you're done with that. You're really quite over that. And you're ready to dive into the substantial. But to dive into the substantial means a direct confrontation with lifetimes of energetic patterns and habit energy and an entire culture that is dead set against any kind of inner inquiry like that, but wants to reduce us all to automatons. So it definitely is the hero's journey, and you're the hero. So I hope you find that encouraging. I find that the more one focuses their attention on understanding the depth of what they're experiencing and not merely seek a way out, an escape, or even a cure for it, the faster it actually resolves into happiness. Go figure. Seems paradoxical, but that's my personal experience, and that's my experience of people I've worked with, and there are many people here on this, right here on this call, that can testify to the truth of that. The more it becomes about, I want to know God. That's the religious way of putting it. I want to know God more than anything. Right? Enough of the world. The world has, it's not a renunciation like that, but it's not been satisfying. It's beautiful. I love it, but I want something else. What can fill this hole except the ultimate knowledge of me, of who I actually am? And that's the biggest mystery of all, because you're not who you think you are. And who you are is beyond what you can possibly imagine. So, does that help you, Carrie? David Maloney. Hi, G. Generally feeling peace, but had a minor meltdown on Wednesday. Had an emotional reaction to an external situation, both intense and prolonged. How should I view these lows? So grateful to you. Not as lows, as unfoldment. If your general state of being is peacefulness or happiness or calmness, you're there, right? We have these very childish spiritual expectations that somehow it's just perpetual bliss and happiness from then on out. What I would say is it's happy most of the time, right? But you just don't know what's coming around the corner that's going to hit that button that's been laying dormant in you for 10 lifetimes. You just don't know. When that happens, know that's what's happening. So something happened. It made a very intense emotional reaction. That's suffering, right? Now, the suffering, the intense reaction, is simply the built-in automatic resistance to that. So you set up this dynamic where I'm here, I'm all peaceful, this thing happens, it takes my peace away. It has now become my enemy. How do I get rid of this? Well, you don't. You embrace it like everything else. You become grateful for the fact that yet another unloved, unhealed, unintegrated aspect of you has just shown its head. This is Kerberos, the three-headed dog that guards the gates of Hades, guards the underworld. Hades. We in our culture, Hades, hell, is this horrible, punishing place. In mythologically, it was the depths of the unconscious. It's the place of our greatest fears. It's the great of loss, of emptiness, of the vastness that we're too afraid to face. And it's guarded by a three-headed dog. It's a place we want to get to. And so when something like this comes up, it triggers you. And what is the trigger? The trigger is an attempt to get away from this situation, because this situation has been just completely smothered in a particular story, a particular meaning that it has gotten. Now, if you stay with it, if you actually stay with it, you see that the situation, the circumstance itself is innocent. There's nothing wrong with it. It means nothing whatsoever. But you have a programmed reaction to it that is filled with meaning, is filled with story. And that's where you want to get to. You want to move through that story, which is the three-headed dog guarding Hades, to get to the actual thing itself. And underneath that, through that story, you'll have trials and tribulations and have to face monsters, but eventually you'll get to the bottom where the treasure is, where your real heart is. And in that, the situation that seemed to be so horrible becomes completely innocent, open, beautiful. Just the natural dynamic expression of life. So it's not a low. You will not be allowed to plateau on the spiritual path. Okay? you'll be given moments of resting by the still waters, as it'd say, where it's, oh, I'm just enjoying this great peace. But then, boom, something else is going to come up. This is the journey. And it will keep happening until it doesn't. And you'll know when it's over. You'll know when that journey has ended. It hasn't ended for me. Stuff comes up. Desires come up. What do you do with them? Everybody has desires. Every day you have a desire, right? They come up. What do you do with them? You fight with it? You argue with it? Some trigger comes up, you know? Now, admittedly, I don't have a lot of triggers anymore. Stuff just goes right on past me. Every now and then, I'll be on the phone trying to, talk to the bank or something, and I've just gone through 9 people, and they all, right? I get a little bit, I can feel that. I can feel that coming up. Okay, there's one button's been pushed. You just completely humbly accept it. I mentioned earlier, Paul referred to having a thorn in his side. We need that thorn in our side. We need that the poking of the ego to keep us engaged. You can go to sleep at any level. When at Buddha's enlightenment, even the angels in archery, we call them the devis, and the people, these beings who lived in heaven for thousands of years, the perfect manifestors, the law of attraction, they just thought of something that would make manifest. They had to come to the Buddha because they were stuck in their world. They were stuck in their infinite imperfection. We need that grading. We need it in order to not become complacent, to not go back to sleep, You can sleep in this world where it's suffering, and better and better, and you can fall asleep here too. The opportunity, the invitation, the temptation to go back to sleep, which is what the devil represented, the temptations of Christ, to go back to sleep in the sense of a personal identity, which meant bow down and worship me, right? Which is the egoic sense of identity instead of the divine sense of the identity. I and my Father are one. He didn't fall for it. Right? And neither should you. And so that little poke in the side, right? That's your crucifixion. I know we don't like to talk about those kinds of things. We just, the resurrection part, but there's no resurrection without a crucifixion. This is the crucifixion. Every time one of these things comes up, that's the nail in the hand. Man, you've just been nailed to the cross of time, right? The cross represents the intersection of heaven and earth and the past and the future. This right now, this right center, and in the center of it is always the myth of the king, the one who brings the order to the cosmos. But that's you nailed to that cross. What's the cross? It is our conditioned responses. It's our history. It's all of the stuff that's coming up that we have to come to see through. How do you see through it? By recognizing your timeless nature and recognizing the infinite openness of the heart space of awareness, which allows even this trigger to come up without objection. Because we were talking earlier with David and Elaine, it doesn't affect consciousness. It doesn't affect you. It only affects the image you have of yourself. The image you hold of yourself is suffering from the beliefs that it has about itself. The consciousness is beholding the entire thing, isn't it? Every aspect of your life, every aspect of your being, everything you call you, is it not just a collection of attributes that are being perceived by something far more subtle, far more transparent? Does that help, David? And then just enjoy then you'll find that the peace remains unbroken even in the midst of the trigger. It's just there. The contentment, the Satchidananda hasn't gone anywhere because consciousness isn't touched by it. So let it happen, right? Let it happen. And if the peace is simply the background of it, peace is not an emotional state. It is the completely empty background to all of it. It's kind of the space even before Om. David says, I will not be allowed to plateau on the spiritual path. LOL, laughing out loud. Thanks, G. I'm thinking that Christ and Buddha are like inspirational figures, but I'm a human being, came here for help. Well, that's, of course, the whole point. Buddha said, the ordinary human being is the Buddha. The ultimate goal of Buddhism is not the Great Enlightenment. It's the surrender to total acceptance of the human condition, of being the human being. Christ was human. Right? He got turned into a god to make him the great exception, which of course gave the Roman Empire its power. But he wasn't. He wasn't any of the things they said he was. He was a sage. He was an enlightened being that just happened to appear in a culture that he had to speak to it in that culture's terms. There wasn't anything extraordinary about him at all. The virgin birth is a myth, by the way. It actually comes from Egypt through Greece, and it's through the Greeks into was then taken in. The only gospel it appears in is the Gospel of Luke, who was a Greek. So he had a completely different set of myths and beliefs than from the Jewish tradition, and the church put them together. Well, the empire put them together to create this church, and they made him a man god, right? So that a man god with, and of course he had to have a mother, right? So that was the little concession to the feminine principle, to the goddess, which then got really eradicated by fundamentalists later. But nonetheless, so you can see the entire thing was a creation to make him not human. Right? But look at his lamentations over Jerusalem, his temptations, his suffering in the Garden of Gethsemane. This was a man. This was a man experiencing exactly what you're experiencing right now. Only at the depth of it was a recognition, I and my Father are one. And of course the statement, the public statement of that got him killed. They don't want to hear that. Jeez. Jesus. I don't want to hear that. So anyway, yeah, you're going to face life as a human being, not as a God man, not as a sage, not as a enlightened one, but as you, as the ordinary human being. That's what this is about. Even in the beginning, when I was talking about how do we deal with this, the violence and stupidity and brutality, and at the same time the deep compassion and just monumental creativity. How do we reconcile these incredible opposites? The only way you can do it is to fully embrace yourself as the ordinary human being. Chop good wood, carry water. After enlightenment, the laundry. Doing dishes is a meditation. Doing your taxes is a meditation. Sitting in the forest is a meditation. As you. And that is what brings the oneness. We see the divinity transparently through the humanity. And so finding your true nature is not an escape from it. It is a liberation of it. It is not the end of mind, it is the transformation of mind. So mind becomes awareness, the dynamic aspect of the silent awareness. Feels like I'm just kind of going off on things. I'm not sure I'm even answering the question, so forgive me if I'm just kind of meandering, but sometimes this is what you get. John says, yes, thank you. Good. Yay. Sunita. Lovely name. Thank you for your videos. They've helped me on many occasions. Well, you're very welcome. Very welcome. I haven't done a lot lately. It seems as though late I'm just really more interested in engaging with people and answering questions than I am about making a discourse on a video. I just can't find the same kind of enthusiasm for it. And I used to do several a day. I think I've got close to 700 videos on YouTube. I've got I think 1,500 of them on Vimeo for my classes and that sort of thing. Way too many, by the way. She continues later. I was in an abusive relationship and I'm struggling to feel attractive and confident again after a lot of put downs. Do you have any advice I've done some tapping with your video. Well, what you're experiencing, my love, is PTSD. When you're in an abusive relationship, whether that be with a lover, somebody that's supposed to be loving you, or with your parents, or a boss, right? We cut a lot of ourselves off in order to survive. This is the mechanism of the nervous system. It's not a personal failing on your part. It's not because you're, a flawed human being. This is the way the nervous system keeps itself alive under circumstances that otherwise would be intolerable. And there's also at the same time a certain attachment to it. An attachment to an abusive relationship where it's hard to get out of it is really simply because it's mirroring the childhood abuse where you couldn't get out of it. So there wasn't this sense of I have an exit strategy. It's simply not available. So I want you to understand this is all natural. People often will get out of a relationship like that finally, and then they'll be beating themselves up. People, why did I let myself do that? Which is more of the same. Don't spend one moment beating yourself up over something that happens to absolutely every one of us. Maybe not that particular form, but we all get attached to things we don't want to let go of. We're afraid to let go of them. So now you are simply coming back to yourself. The abuse being one of, I don't know if it was physical or emotional or both, but it's really always emotional. Physical abuse, those wounds heal quickly, but the emotional powerlessness that we feel, that does not heal so quickly. So there's a sense of being powerless. The message being communicated to you is you're not attractive. Nobody's going to want you except me. So you better just do it as I say. It's horrific. It's vile. It's wrong. But oftentimes we don't have a reference point inside of us that says that's nonsense, that's bullshit, right? Of course I am, right? And why don't we have that inside? Well, because we never got that kind of acknowledgement. I'm sure you didn't get that acknowledgement when you were young, that you were always diminished in some way. It might have been just the nature of your culture. I don't know where you're from. It could have been just your particular parents, your particular tribe. Anyway, especially for women who are demeaned in so many cultures around the world. The value of woman, the value of the feminine principle has been brutally discounted. So I don't want to get off in that too much, but I want to make it more specific to you. What you are experiencing is simply your nervous system has learned to acknowledge and defer to the opinions of others more than your own self-awareness. So you say, so there's just a thought, a recurring thought, and a feeling in your body, I am not attractive. Well, it's not true. It's not true. There's no such thing as an unattractive person. There's no such thing as a person who's attractive to everybody, right? But it's not a fact, right? You're not attractive. That was a manipulative way. So you've basically been brainwashed by a little cult. That's what's happened. So as you're tapping through it, just don't try to make it too complicated. The act of tapping on your body is like acupuncture. It has a powerful and a beautiful effect on the flow of energy. Your intention alone to become free of this is enough. You don't have to say the right words. You don't have to make it perfect. Matter of fact, I'd be happy to do a video about it. It gives me focus. It's someplace I can focus the attention to do a video about that. But your nervous system is simply stuck in a position. It doesn't want to let itself be attractive, because what happens when you're attractive? You get these guys coming, right? You get these parasites, these vampires that are coming. Well, geez, I don't want to be, right? It is a self-protective mechanism. So what we need to do is we need to open up this inner environment so that it doesn't need to protect itself by remaining invisible, remaining unattractive, remaining, a wallflower sitting in the background. That there's all sorts of other ways, wisdom being at the top of the list, for protecting you from those that you really do need protection from, without shutting off your innate beauty, creativity, and intelligence, and warmth, and just all the wonderful goddess energy that is woman. To find the power of that as well. So don't try to assert it, don't try to force it. Recognize that the only thing that's going on is that your nervous system wants to keep you safe. And the less attractive you are, the safer you are, until you have some other way of keeping you safe that allows for your natural attractiveness to be seen and appreciated, to truly appreciated, not dominated. And that's the worst part of the male psyche, to dominate. What's the worst part of the female too? We just have more episodes of it with the male towards the female than the other way. But I've seen it the other way as well. So simply know you are in a defensive posture. It's not conscious, it's not something you chose, this is the way the nervous system works. And so with tapping and just reminding yourself that this is where I am, that I'm in this posture, and giving the nervous system permission to come out of that posture and create an environment that's safe enough that you don't need it. That's the transition to make. You can't force it, because it's its strategy now for keeping you safe. So it needs a different strategy, right? And I'm thinking of actually doing a workshop on this, the irreverent tapping techniques. But if you're tapping, you voice it, even though I'm not attracted. Don't even say I feel that way. Don't try to soft pedal it. I'm not attractive. Period. I deeply and completely love and accept myself anyway. And if you can't say that, say the opposite. Just say, and I totally hate and reject myself anyway. That may sound really strange on the surface, but the fact of the matter is, it has a very powerful impact for opening up the space. Somehow the nervous system itself sees that that's a bit extreme. Okay? So just voice clearly, unambiguously, as your truth, whatever it is you're feeling in this moment, and just keep doing it for a while, and then just check in to see if the truth of it doesn't seem quite so true anymore. And this is what opens up the inner space, so your nervous system detects that it's in a different environment, that the environment is safer because you've become more safe to yourself. The moment the nervous system detects the shift in the environment, it immediately begins to organize itself in there. It adapts to it. That's what it is. Humans are the most successful critter on the planet because of our adaptability. Does that help you? Oh, dear heart. I hope it does. Asterisk star with the 4-leaf clover. How to look or deal with a physical ailment and pain with the lens of consciousness. Well, whenever it comes to something like physical ailment and pain, I have to be responsible as a public figure of sorts, and make sure that I'm not stepping on any kind of medical toes. Check it out. make sure there's nothing structure or physically wrong. Oftentimes there isn't. Go to more holistic doctors, because a lot of doctors just will assume there must be something there, so they're going to, fuse some vertebrae or something. Lower back problem is a real chronic pain issue. So make sure a doctor will say, I can't find anything wrong with you. I'm not really sure what it is. They do exist. They do exist. They don't like to do that. But they do exist. That aside now, both pain and pleasure arise within the same field of consciousness, do they not? Pain cannot exist, does not exist, without you there to perceive it. What I like to do with any kind of distress, whether it be physical pain or emotional pain, is to move towards it. You'll notice that pain, of course, makes us want to resist. We want to move away from the pain. And we create all sorts of different stories and explanations in order to do that. Reframes, all sorts of things in order to do that. My solution is much simpler. Cut through all the stories, forget the stories, and just go directly to the sensation itself. Now this is hard simply because we don't want to do that. Even the body wants to move away from pain. That's its boast, right? It's danger, it wants to move away. So it's very natural to want to. And so we need to step up the game of consciousness, which is operating on a different level than simply the physical sensations, and move towards it through the story, through associations, through all the ideas we have about it, to just feel the sensation itself. A sensation without resistance will not create suffering. It may be painful, but it will not create suffering, because resistance is suffering. Now, of course, the desire to transcend, to overcome the pain, is going to be there. What I'm saying is the way you transcend is going through it. To find it as just a sensation that comes and goes. And at that point, the actual information, the actual story, the real cause of this pain in the body can become revealed. It can't be revealed if we think we know what it is. You can't fill a cup that's already full, right? So if I've got my theories, my psychology, and my medical diagnosis, I've got all these things, and I think I know what it is, there's no room for the actual energy itself to reveal itself to you, right? In fact, you thinking you know what it is holds it in place. Oh, this is what it is, right? How do I get rid of it? So now and this is all going on in the mind. In the meantime, the sensation is just sitting there. And what knows what happened better than the energy that's trapped in the body that got put there by the event that put it there? What would be the most direct access to the actual solution to the problem if it's not that? So I use EFT and the like as another means of doing that. It kind of helps loosen some of the resistance of the system so we can move closer to it. It isn't merely to suppress symptoms, it's to move through the symptoms to actually get to the source. And then you can literally have a conversation with the pain, saying, why are you here? What are you trying to tell me? What's out of whack? What's off? How can I help you? What do I need to do, if anything? And you can get some really wacky ideas. Say, you gotta brush your teeth more often, or take more walks, or something will come, because this is the actual source. This is the wisdom of the universe. This is the wisdom of life. It is embedded. It just doesn't speak English. It speaks the language of sensation. So all that said, you can when you take the role, step into your actual place as the consciousness that is aware of these things. It isn't cold, it isn't analytical, it isn't theoretical. It's the opening of the heart. Because if consciousness is simply aware of it, the pleasure and the pain, and consciousness is unaffected by it, it empowers you to move towards it, knowing full well that it really can't harm you as consciousness. But instead, there's this compassion towards a distressed energy within this system. And you don't have to take it so personally anymore. It becomes like a child in pain. You see some child in pain, you can't help but want to help them. You can't stop it. You can't ignore them. It's an enormous amount of effort and a dried up heart to be able to do that. And yet we do that all the time with these both emotional and physical pains in our bodies. We want to just go away, kid. You bother me. The W.C. Fields line. So, the more you're identified with consciousness, the more your heart is open to that. The easier it is to do. It really becomes it becomes natural, because awareness has no argument with anything. That's the real transcendence beyond right and wrong. It's not this amoral, amorphous thing. It's a genuine transcendence. And to transcend doesn't mean to get away. It means to subsume it in something greater. That the scene becomes so much greater that you can see on this level the right and wrong as they play out, but you can see on another level where they're just a momentary flash. They're just they're just a perspective, because one man's evil is another man's God, right? So does that help you? Asterisk? Cool name though. Asterisk Star. You should be an author or something. Sophie. Hi, Sophie. Dear GP, deepening in love and the wisdom of compassionate recognition of innocence. On retreat with B, prior in Crete, sending love. Retreat with B? Well, so I retreat with B, prior in Crete, sending love. Oh, well, wonderful. Deepening in love and the wisdom of compassion. This is the flowering of human consciousness. This is the perfume of the transcendent being, the being, the actual emptiness that is the source of all the somethingness. So wonderful to hear. Wonderful to hear. David and Elaine, answered very well and beyond. Thanks, GP. You're very welcome. Very welcome. Sometimes I just kind of go off and I don't really know what's going to come out of my mouth or where it's going to go. I just keep hoping that it, has the healing effect that I want it to. The older I get, the less I want to edit myself and make it stick into a little cubby. Amber, hi G, joining you from St. Pete, Florida. I'd love to hear you discuss shadow work and how you relate to it with the IR course. Would love to know if you've experimented with psychedelics. Thank you. All right. Psychedelics, yes, I have. I have found them with real shamans. I would never recommend to anybody doing it just for fun or without the proper kind of guidance. It's valuable as a tool for opening. For some people, I think it may be even a necessary tool, but it isn't, well, not necessary in the sense it has to happen. It's not an absolute necessity, and it's not the ultimate because it's just an experience. And any kind of experience that opens our heart, that opens our perspective and makes us realize that our habitual ways of being are not all there is to life. They're not the absolute truth, and we've been clinging to them as if they were. to me is a valuable thing. Back in the 90s, there was an entire edition of Tricycle magazine, which is one of the leading magazines of Buddhism, on the use of psychedelics in Buddhist practice, and it was really down the line. Half the articles were, "Yep, it's extremely useful." Other half the "Nope," the traditional approach. I don't want to come down on one side or the other. I know that there's a lot of well-known Buddhist leaders now who actually are including mushrooms or ayahuasca in retreats, for the simple reason that people can meditate for 30 years and not have that significant breakthrough that makes them realize why they've been meditating for 30 years. And the medicines, and I call them medicines, not drugs, will give you that experience. Now, on the other side of it, I've seen people then get into that, and it becomes all about the experience. They become chasing the bliss, right? And so every weekend, they're doing some more and more, and there are hundreds of journeys. Terence McKenna, who is kind of the big spokesman, especially for the mushrooms, said twice a year. That was it, twice a year, and then integrated it. But again, if there's no context to integrate it, I've seen it, and I know a lot of people, some friends of mine that are shamans and training to be shamans, and what I found in a lot of the groups is just, the plant medicines were developed within a particular culture, oftentimes thousands of years old. The shamanic traditions. The shaman had a very specific, important role within the culture, and oftentimes, these things were not undertaken lightly. They were ritualized. They're part of a context. They were part of an entire cultural framework. Well, we don't have that. We're just kind of taking the medicines and hoping for the best. We've kind of got a loose, there's kind of the new agey thing. There's a bit, psychology. It's some pop and positive psychology. There's various kinds of practices at spirituality. This is just kind of another stone thrown into that lake. And so on one side I see the benefit, on the other side I see the danger, because it does not have the kind of roots and foundation that can allow for this to be integrated into something deeper. It is a medicine. It's not made to be a way of life. It is a cure for an ailment. The ailment, it's an anti-inflammatory for an inflamed ego. Right? So it is supposed to be a temporary thing, and the cultural framework is the permanent thing, or a spiritual framework. If you go to a traditional, like a Shipibo ceremony in Peru, you're on a diet, right? It isn't just, you're in isolation, you're alone in a hut, they bring you your food, you go for a journey, but then you're there eating a very bland diet with a particular medicinal plant. It has nothing to do with journey or psychedelics. It's all the integration of your life into relationship back with nature. That's really what it's about, to become reconnected to that. So for most people, I don't become an advocate of it, because I don't think there's the proper context. 6 months of consistent work in inner reconciliation, which I'll get to in a second, or meditation, or something that's got a spiritual depth to it, will give you a platform on which something like that could be useful if you're with the right people. Other than that, I say don't bother. Don't bother, and it isn't absolutely necessary. What we're doing here in challenging our most cherished beliefs with a completely different model of the universe, namely consciousness as primary, is the equivalent of it. And I find this to be a much more direct approach than even the meditations in the good traditions. Right? So I'll leave that for that, and let's go to the other one. Shadow work. Shadow, unconscious. These are all words meant to designate the unprocessed, unhandled material. They become called the shadow because basically there are natural inclinations, and I talk about this extensively in Inner Reconciliation because it's the whole heart of the essential trauma that we all suffer, and that is our natural exuberance of life as children meets with the negation of the tribe. And so huge parts of us, natural parts of us we cannot get rid of, they become dangerous to the environment in which we live, so they have to become suppressed. Being suppressed, then we create other behaviors to present to the environment which are not really us. Some of the real us is allowed to shine through. In my case, I had no opportunity for anything to shine through until I started playing in rock and roll bands, right? And suddenly there was a place where my creative impulses could come out. We had no limits on us. This was before the industry had become so commercialized that everybody was just doing dance numbers. We were actually, here we are, 15-year-old kids, writing these big pieces of music in a basement. A lot of it not so good, but but there was talent there that was brimming, and there was a freedom. We all felt it, right? It was the relief to the oppression of just the middle class blandness, the repression of sexuality, of creativity, everything was sameness. So it was how did I get off on this tangent? Anyway, this is what happens. It gets repressed. A false you gets created to present to the environment to make sure you survive, right? So now there's this huge inner conflict. There's the you that is a creation of and for the tribe that keeps you safe, and there's this energy that I call the nymph that is dying to get out and express itself, right? That's the shadow in Jung's work, right? It's unconscious repressed material in Freud, and he saw everything in terms of repressed sexual energy, right? Whatever. But it is the same thing, basically. It is exactly the same thing. And so I deal with it in Inner Reconciliation. I just call it the inner energies. If I use the chakras as a model, which I do, and I just show that as the first chakra represents the tribe, which is this drive toward safety at all costs, right? No matter what I have to do, chew my leg off to get out of the trap, right? And the next level there is the nymph, just this unbridled expression of life and exuberance, childlikeness, and the absolute conflict between the two of those, which then gets resolved by this thing we call the ego. And that is exactly what Jung and Freud said, that the ego's job is to keep this whole thing stable, right? And of course, when these things bubble up, right, because they inevitably do, and they get in the way, we think of them as problems and habits or stuff we have to get rid of. We don't realize what they actually are. They're typified in mythology as monsters of the deep, right? They're you. They're the repressed you. They become shadows because they cannot come out in the light. So our job, of course, is to dissolve that wall with such a level of safety that they can begin to emerge in their actual form. Not come out sideways, not as shadows, not as monsters, not as self-criticism and judgment and all that, and or hatred of others or any of those things. They can come out as they really are. They're innocent, beautiful, natural aspects of your own being. That's what inner reconciliation is. That's my way of approaching it. And so I just have a more spiritual way of approaching it, although Jung's way was very, very spiritual, than most. Because for me, I didn't come into this understanding through a psychological path. I don't have a degree in anything. I came to it through a spiritual path. But through the spiritual path, coming from that perspective, it made it far easier for me to see the mechanisms of the human psyche and the human mind and the human body from this place of innocence and freedom. Even though the process of doing that put me right smack dab in the middle of it as an ordinary human being, not some kind of transcendence out there. It wasn't like that at all. It was right smack dab in the middle of it. But that's kind of the perspective. I came to it through this way, rather than through that approach. If I had, I probably would have just been a psychotherapist of some sort, if not a rock and roll star, which is what I really wanted to be. Thank God that didn't happen. So does that answer it for you, Amber? Help me get a little plug for my inner reconciliation courses too, which I am looking at redoing now, since I've done these webinars, which I'm going to do another again in November, to introduce people to inner reconciliation. I'm going to, I think I'm going to be simplifying it and trying to do a whole lot more interactive work with groups and the like. So stay tuned. John, in order for awakening to happen, should you focus on questioning ego experience, the presence? Well, it's both. There's in inner reconciliation, I call it, there's the doorway of allowing, which is, meditation, pondering, being present with it, and the doorway of inquiry. What is this? What is it made of? Right? Both are required. One you could think of as the masculine principle, or Vedanta. The other you could think of as the feminine principle, or Tantra. But both are absolutely necessary. You start with allowing, just being present with it. And remember, all the ego is a collection of thoughts and emotions and behaviors. That's all it is. It's not a thing, right? So it always has to start with the practice of allowing, or meditation, so that you can be willing to be present with the discomfort. Because, of course, getting away from the discomfort is what our lives have been about, right? That's what all the that's what it's been about. I mean, the initial discomfort of not being able to be yourself in your own environment, right? Keeping that at bay, keeping that down. So avoiding is systemic. It's built into the whole functioning of our human lives. So the first step is to begin to turn towards the pain rather than away from it. That takes some practice, but once you get to a certain point, now sometimes that alone is enough to completely dissolve some deep trauma, and I've seen that happen. But oftentimes it isn't, right? So now you've got a space, but you've got trapped energy there. I mean, it's not, okay, I don't trust this. The war's not over. You can't convince me the war's over. You're just trying to trick me. So some kind of inquiry into the nature of what you're actually experiencing. Be a dialogue with that nature, or a more existential look at it. Where is this coming from? And beginning to see yourself as the consciousness that is behind this entire thing, that is the witness of the entire thing. And then looking at the various kinds of thoughts and beliefs that say, no, I'm the body, I'm my thoughts, and then go, oh, am I really? Now, that query can be made at any time, but the more open your heart is, right, to allow yourself to feel just kind of the ambivalence, the ambiguity, and the stuff, and to allow ourselves to feel that, and be able to, you can see the question becomes much more piercing, if I'm going, well, I'm not going to have the same kind of clutching hold on that sense of identity. I'm going to release it a little bit. Go, well, who am I really? Is this really true? Is this what I'm really like? Where did this thought, belief come from? So you can challenge assumptions, but not as an aggressor, right? It's a very different spirit. The aggressive spirit always puts the nervous system into defensive mode. That's why self-help doesn't work very much, because we kind of tend to think of ourselves as we're going to fix this, right? That whole approach. But your nervous system could see that coming from a mile away and is perfectly defended against it. It'll have no effect whatsoever. Maybe for a minute. You can trick it for a minute, and then it'll figure it out, and you'll be right back. That's why we make such little progress in the whole self-help thing. So, let's see. Did I cover all of that? So, whichever approach, the approach of just pure allowing or inquiry, whichever the one that feels the most appropriate in the moment, that's the one you go with. Right? So it's not this is a creative venture, right? This is a creative exploration. It's not a practice in that sense. It's not a step by step you follow. You are discovering yourself, and you get an instinct for it. And you know what? I'm okay with it. I really want to do some deep inquiry. They tell me I'm nothing but consciousness. Is that really true? What would that look like? What am I experiencing out here? How can I say this is consciousness? I can't. This is real. Look, I can touch it, right? That's like consciousness. I don't get it. But then you can give yourself the freedom to truly explore that. Like I did in the beginning when I was talking about the images in your mind. And that you don't ever see anything out there. You see everything in here. So nothing you are experiencing is actually out there, objectively, in your experience. We can argue whether it's out there independent of your experience or not. I say it isn't. But first step is just recognize that it's a recognized scientific fact that you experience images in the brain and not externally. We just believe that what we are experiencing in here is a pretty good likeness of what's out there. We don't have any real evidence of it, nor could we ever. But functioning to our survival, when you look at it purely from the mechanism of survival, well, it works well enough. But when you want to take it to the next level of an existential inquiry, now it becomes a little bit more interesting and requires really a scientific kind of curiosity about it, to want to know how it works. That's the inquiry. That's the spirit behind the inquiry. But the inquiry will be stunted if there's not an open-hearted allowing, because the inquiry is going to go through more than just thought. It's going to have to run into layers of emotional reaction. It's going to have to run into sensations. It's going to have to run into inner resistances. It's going to run into fears. It's going to run into all sorts of material which is not of the intellect. And if we don't have that open space in which we can receive that and be present with that, we're just going to run away. Or worse, we're going to turn it into an intellectual exercise. You're going to get neo-Advaita and no genuine transformation take place. Does that help you there, John? Thank you, buddy. Bo, hello, Bo. Hi, G. Greetings from Kelowna, BC. Kelowna, yeah. How do we get rid of... I'm going to be in BC. Actually, I'm planning now at the Krishnamurti Center a 3-day retreat in Victoria, on Vancouver Island. So I'll be letting people know as soon as we solidify the dates. Probably summer, maybe late spring, because I'm also trying to plan a trip to Europe. So, okay, how do we get rid of the last thoughts or maybe even intellectual understanding of non-duality that seem to prevent us from a direct recognition of our true nature? Wonderful question. Wonderful question. Well, you don't get rid of the thoughts, you see through them. A thought has absolutely no power unless we believe it. Simple as that. Right? So, let me attempt to show you a very subtle thing that you are missing. Are you not experiencing directly, right this minute, your thoughts, your emotions, and your sensations? That is the direct experience. You are always directly experiencing reality. You couldn't be anything else. You're not experiencing unreality. You are really experiencing reality. We have just misinterpreted it to be something other than that. We're calling it matter, universe, separation, lack, fear. We call it that, but that's not what it is. And what we are lacking or fearing or any of those things turns out to be nothing but an image in your mind. Now, are you not having a direct recognition of the image in your mind? Of course you are. You wouldn't be able to put it in your question if you weren't. So the only problem is you believe that the presence of this doubting thought is evidence that you're not having the direct experience. It's not true. You're having the direct experience of a doubting thought. Now, if you don't give that thought any authority, say, oh, it's a doubting thought that arose, and don't feel any need to get rid of it, but just recognize it's a doubting thought, right? And doubting thoughts come and go. It's not always there, but I am always here, and I have no doubt whatsoever about my existence. That's all you have to do. We don't have to turn it into a big project, a big event, a big practice that has to be done. It's a simple seeing. Oh, I'm always witnessing whatever comes up. I just happen to believe this thought that says, I'm not awake yet. Well, it is to the awakeness that this thought appears. Right? So the eye simply has to come back home behind the lens where it's always been, instead of imagining itself to be out there somewhere. Just keep coming back to this place from which everything is being seen, and realize that just because a thought appears doesn't make it true. Just because the thought says, oh, you have this doubting thought, so you're blocked now, right? You're preventing me from having the direct experience. But you're having the direct experience. You're having the direct experience of a doubting thought that's claiming to be a block. Now, all you have to do is go, oh, it's not true. That's it. Game over. As Christ said, let your conversation be simple. A, nay, nay. Yes, yes, no, no. No, true, not true. And recognize, this is always the position you're sitting at. See, the problem is that in the spirituality, we somehow think we're supposed to get to this state where there's always these beautiful, perfect, wonderful thoughts. That never happens. The nervous system is a reactive pattern. It's engaged with life. It's trying to keep itself safe. There's all this stuff going on. So this is always going to be there. It has nothing to do with you. You can just simply watch it happen. And if you have no vested interest in the outcome, you're free, and it doesn't touch you. And the more you realize that it isn't you, it is simply reactive patterns, and it isn't anybody at all. There's nobody reacting. There's just a reactive pattern. It's more of a robot than a being. Well, then you're free of it. You can just let it happen. If you think you need to fix that, change that, make it better, make it prettier, make it more palatable, well, now you're tied to it, aren't you? You have an attachment to a particular outcome, which makes the presence of this an offense. We have to get rid of it. You've created a conflict where there isn't one. There's simply the arising of a thought. And the thoughts that arise will always follow the patterns that they have in the past, and over time the patterns change and different thoughts arise. But it's no big deal. It really is no big deal. It has no weight, it has no authority, it has no prominence unless you say it does. So who's the arbiter of the direct experience? You. And is there ever a moment when you are not experiencing? You simply don't need to believe what the mind has said about it. That's all. And know that even though you don't believe it, the mind may keep saying it for a while, right? It's like, was that movie Office Space? love that movie. The one guy who actually hadn't been employed, they fired him 2 years ago, but they forgot to cancel his check, so he keeps coming up back to work. He probably doesn't work. They keep moving him places, and nobody knows what he does because he doesn't actually work there. Right? That's it. Mooji would describe it as you fire your mind, and next day he's at his desk working, and you go, I thought I fired you. No, you were thinking about it, but you can see I'm here. I'm ready to work. I'm really vigilant. Right? It's the way it is. It just keeps coming up. So what? Really. If you don't make a deal out of it, there's no deal to be made, because who else can make the deal out of it, right? There's nobody else out there to tell you that this is a big deal. So is that helping? Am I getting there, Bo? I want to clear away all the blocks, because all the blocks are self-constructed. You are right now having the direct recognition. That's what's actually happening. The context, the inner speaking, the concepts, the ideas need to catch up with what's actually happening. You've been taught that something else is happening, and somehow this direct experience is this ideal state you're trying to get at. It's not true. It is what is happening, always has been happening, always will be happening, but we've believed it to be something else. We simply need to discard the beliefs and bring our thoughts in line with what's really happening. Then you realize that you've never been anything else. Then all of those statements, you've always been awake, start to make sense. You've always been the enlightened being, right? The form that an enlightened being takes, like a sage or some great event of special effects, is no more real than the delusion. You can say, as masters have said, delusion, enlightenment, same thing. Because they are. They're simply events being witnessed by the same transcendent reality, which is what your being really is. It's what is actually seeing all of this, which is you. Does that help, buddy? Ducks. Hey, GP, is this path ultimately constant, reminding to return to its center, or does it become effortless at some point? Well, first off, you can see how attached you are to the effortlessness of it, right? As if somehow the effortlessness is the sign of arriving. They measured people. They would use things like biofeedback to help people with meditation. And there are many times people would be in a meditation, the biofeedback machine, and after it was over, they say, boy, that was horrible meditation. I didn't even get close to it. And then they would say, you know what? According to your brain, you were right in the middle of it. You were absolutely in the alpha zone. And they go, what? So our expectations of what this is supposed to be like and what it's actually like are very different. Ultimately, it's not a return to the center. It's the recognition you've never been anyplace else. That the journey away from the center was imaginary. It never actually happened. How could it? If the center is awareness, then it's from the position of awareness that you witness this seeker going off on their journey, trying to find their way home. It's like the movie on the screen of the seeker going to mountains and to oceans and all over the place looking for his essence. It's nothing but a projection of the screen. It's being witnessed by the screen. The awareness is the witness. So awareness is sitting there witnessing somebody seeking awareness. Interesting. It's an interesting movie, right? Great stories, lots of stories throughout all history about such a thing. But the cosmic joke is when we realize, oh, I've never left. This has always been where I am. I couldn't actually be anywhere else. And explore that. Can you be anywhere else other than this awareness? Can you step outside of it and look back at it? It's the only place you've ever been. That's where you put your attention. Not trying to convince yourself it's the only place you've been, but looking and going, does anything happen without it? All these things, all the adventures, the journeys, the ups and the downs, have they not all been perceived from exactly the same place that I've never left? That's where you go. And then, of course, it's not illegitimate to say, to remind yourself of that, because the habit of thought, right, and emotion and sensation of being this person on the journey, right, will come up again. You'll find yourself acting that out, and you go, oh wait, that's right. I'm not that person on the journey. I'm the aware awakeness that is watching this story of the person on the journey. So from that point of view, yes, go back to reminding yourself, but it turns into something like, I'm trying to get back there. Notice that too is being observed from exactly the same place. And the moment you do that, you are back there. Of course, realizing that you've never been anywhere else. That's all that's ever happened. And I just encourage you to look at that yourself. See if you can find some place where that's not been the case, where you were outside of your awareness. See if you can find it. It's like people saying, oh, I'm just not really in the present moment. I said, okay, do me a favor and try to get out of the present moment. Do everything you possibly can to get out of right now. I'll wait. You can't do it. So the think, oh, I'm not present, is actually a silly thing to say. All that means is that I've been listening to my thoughts more than paying attention to what I'm actually experiencing. I'm listening to the theories of life rather than being life. And then it's not a practice, it's not a process, it's not even a reminding. You see, the reminding even happens spontaneously, and that's where the effortlessness is really discovered. So you don't have to pursue it. It's not the sign. Whether there's effort or not effort, or effortlessness, are they both not perceived from exactly the same place? You have to understand that the awareness that is perceiving these is transcendent. It is neither effortless nor not effortless. It neither exists nor does not exist. It's neither good nor bad. It is neither just nor unjust. It is the perceiver of all. And as the perceiver of all the opposites, it is beyond all possible definition, conceptualization, understanding, knowability. It is the knowingness itself. This is what's meant by transcendent. It appears as beauty and truth and love and intimacy and the like. It appears that way. But that's the appearance, that's the masks of God, as Joseph Campbell would call it. Right? But the actual God itself, the actual essence itself, is transcendent of all categorization. And that's what you are. That's the place from which you are looking at. So even effort and effortlessness become meaningless. If effortlessness is required in some moment, then effort is what is required. And effort happens. If effortlessness, then effortlessness happens. But the you, the real you, is neither effort nor effortless. It's the transcendent. That's all I can say about it. That's all I can say as I speak about this all day, every day. Well, that's all I can say. I've run out of words. No, I haven't. There will be no running out of words. Hopefully that helps you, ducks. Oh my goodness, got a lot of questions here, and we're already at 2 hours. Okay, anyway. I keep going for a bit. Dave Maloney, I will not be allowed to play... Oh, I already read that one. I'm a human being. Came for help. Received. Inspirational figures. I'm a human being. Came here for help. Received. Good. Good, good, good. Shane O'Flaherty. What's up, GP? I had 2 big manifestations in the last 2 weeks because of you. I'm going to share. Thank you, my friend. Well, thank you, Shane. Can't wait to hear. David Elaine, so good to be reminded not to beat ourselves up for being human. The human is the divine. This is the paradox of the whole thing. The ordinary human being is the Buddha. It's not a weakness. It is that the key is making it transparent to transcendence. That's a term that Joseph Campbell uses all the time. You can tell I'm reading a lot of Joseph Campbell right now. And he quoted it from a German psychologist, I think, Kurt Durkheim, not to be confused with Emil Durkheim, the philosopher, who used that phrase, transparent to transcendent. The human is the divine. The two are not one. The image on the screen is the screen, right? So the human is the divine. The individual is the universal. Right? Every moment is seen. Every moment. When the doors of perception are opened, man sees everything as it is, infinite. William Blake. If we seek to immerse ourselves in the divine and forget our humanity, we have inadvertently created separation. Yes, you've created the artificial non-duality. You've created Neo-Advaita. You've created an absolute. You're stuck in the absolute. You know, as they would say in Zen, he stinks of Zen, stuck in the absolute. The human is the divine is the human. They are inseparable. As I said, what would music be if there was no songs being sung, right? And yet every song is music, the infinitude of music, the full infinite potential of music in every single song. Whether it be, you know, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, the glory of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, or the annoyance, the annoyance of yet another round of Happy Birthday, right? I mean, it's all music. The infinitude of music is in every single one of those. Infinity in the palm of my hand, eternity in the flower. William Blake again. And yes, you create a division where there isn't one. But this is the place. When we talk about it like this, we hit the boundary of the mind, because the mind cannot go beyond comparing opposites. It's got to have two. It can't go into the realm of pure oneness. Because pure oneness, unless it tries to imagine it as just one. You know, the nothing without a something, right? The absolute without the relative. Buddha without the Sangha. It attempts to do that. That's the mind trying to make a non-duality being there's just one and nothing else. That's not non-duality. It's not numeric. The one is the one. The one is sitting here having a conversation with you, and the one is listening, and the one is asking questions, and the one is the microphone picking up my voice, and the one is this candle sitting next to me. They're all attributes, concrete manifestations of the one transcendent unknowable. So that's who you are. The beauty of being human is that you get to know this. This is the reward. The big benefit of being human. You know this. You come to see this. This is the culmination of eternity. I know, completely mystical thing. How do you have a culmination of eternity? You do, right now. Anyway, Claudia, hi G. It seems like YouTube is blowing up with law of attraction manifestation videos. So, if everything is just an appearance in consciousness, then what exactly is doing the manifesting? Oh, I love this question because it's the key. The law of attraction manifestation is the ego's attempt to grab a hold and use to its purposes the actual natural functioning of the universe. This is the Tao. This is the divinity. This is the I am. This is God known. And this is the ego trying to usurp it for its purposes. Well, of course, it's the universe. It's not going to let itself be contained by somebody who wants their dream life, right? As I mentioned in the webinar that I did on inner reconciliation, as long as that sense of separation exists, that gets created out of the childhood traumas, as long as that exists, there's going to be all of your dreams and desires, ambitions and aspirations are going to be questionable, because the real you is not really present. The fake you that's been created in order to survive in the particular environment, it's that dreams and ambitions and aspirations, which is why oftentimes we can achieve something in life we really, really want and we're not satisfied. Well, why not? Because it was not really your aspiration in the first place. But you hadn't done yet the inner work to get to the real you, so that when those desires and aspirations arise, they have genuine authenticity to them. They're the real deal. Now, where do they arise from? I'm getting to your who or what exactly is doing the manifesting. All you have to do, manifestation starts with what? It starts with a desire, right? I think, is it Abraham Hicks, every event, they say, good morning, good morning or good afternoon. Do you know what you are wanting? Everything starts with a desire. Because manifestation is, I have a desire, I want to manifest it. So now a desire arises. We take ownership of that desire. I want to manifest that. So now I, the separate self, the egoic mind, have become the owner of this desire, and now it's my job to get it manifested. So I'm going to do some rites. I'm going to do some rituals. I'm going to do some manifestation meditation. I'm going to do law of attraction. I'm going to do a gratitude walk. I'm going to have my vision board, right? A million things. So I've now taken control of this process by which the desire reaches a fulfillment. Stop for a second and let's walk all the way back. All the way back to the moment right before the desire appeared. Were you there? Did you create it? Can you find yourself there pondering, what do I want to desire? The desire arose completely spontaneously out of nowhere, or out of awareness. Suddenly just popped into the field of awareness. Now, who owns it at that point? Nobody. But the moment it appears, because of our conditioning, the moment it appears, a sense of self, an ego arises. Now, it's dormant, right? It's not even there. But this triggers a reactive pattern, and that is the ego saying, this desire. Now it can be filled with fear and even suffering because, desires, I never get my desires, I never get what I want, this is terrible, I could try, I hate this, please go away, suppress, belittle, maybe I'll make it smaller so it doesn't bother me. But this is secondary, isn't it? The desire's already appeared. It's already there. And it's fully formed as a desire. If you don't take ownership of that desire, what manifests it? Well, it would have to be the energy of awareness itself. But if you don't take ownership of it, you've got no vested interest in whether that manifest fulfills itself or not, do you? Your life doesn't depend on that, so you're free. So now you're sitting in this place of total freedom. A desire arises, wonderful, it's great. Hang out, don't hang out. Now that's free too, isn't it? Now the desire is free to just kind of develop. It becomes like a seed that's in the ground, you don't know it's there, and suddenly there's a sprout, but you don't even know what plant it is. But you're interested because, if this could be a really great plant, could be something really, really beautiful, maybe, maybe a medicinal plant or something. Or it may just die, you never know what it is, it just fades back in again. It's of no consequence to you. So now you're really free from the whole thing. But notice that doesn't stop desires from arising. I mean, thank God, if desires don't arise, humanity, all of life just stops. It is nothing but desire. This is one of the ambiguity, the paradoxes of life, just like life feeds on life, that we have to come to terms with in our spirituality. I'm supposed to be free of desire, and that's how I attain nirvana, but desires never stop. How in the world does this work? Well, this is how it works. You don't stop them, but you see that all desire belongs to life itself. It's not a personal possession. Now the ego, it gradually dissolves and is out of the picture. So now a desire can fulfill itself or not fulfill itself. But the energy of fulfillment is in the desire. What you see as a desire, if you're looking at an acorn, are you not also looking at the oak tree? Is that not an oak tree? It's just in a nascent state. It's in its embryonic state, right? So the desire and the fulfillment are one. And their unfoldment creates time. So there's an experience of it unfolding. Just like, you're talking to my 3-year-old granddaughter. I look forward to talking to her when she's 20. Maybe I'll be around long enough to talk to her when she's 40. Will it be the same being? Yes and no. It'll be a discovery arising, something inherent. So the Bible said the seed is within itself, reproducing after its kind. The seed just continues to open, but you see it as the functioning of life itself, not as a personal possession. So who's doing the manifesting? Life is doing the manifesting. All desire is the desire of life. All desire is a cosmic event. The desire is the universe. Remember, the universal and the particular are one. Is this getting to it for you, Claudia? So the whole law of attraction thing is very remedial. It's very remedial, right? When it first came out, The Secret first came out, I thought, oh my God, there is so much missing. I now know a lot of the people around The Secret are friends of mine, and they pretty much all said the same thing. It isn't really like the way they depicted it in the movie. But it struck a nerve. It opened up a lot of people. It took a lot of people out of victimhood and made them take response. So it had a very positive impact. But as long as it's being seen through the eyes of this separate self, this imaginary person we take ourselves to be, it's always going to be tainted. It's going to become a personal thing. And inevitably, it's going to create more suffering than it cures. Because as you very well know, most people, they don't manifest anything, or very little. The results are meager at best. So thank you, Claudia. Thank you. Robert Hill, hi G. Direct path versus yogic science. Yoga gurus can control all unconscious body functionings, tweaking stuff, etc. Is this necessary? Absolutely not. And every real sage will tell you, don't bother, it's a waste of time. There's a story, I read it in My Life Among the Himalayan Masters, the story of Sri Rama, Swami Rama, who founded the East-West bookstores and the Himalaya Institute, which I went and meditated there when I was in New York. And he told the story of somebody he had met. He went at a very young age. He was apprenticed to a Himalayan master, and he was living with him. And he was a teenager. He was older. He had normal teenage stuff going on, and he met this one guy who could breathe fire. He's one of these yogic guys who could do these miraculous things. Breathe fire. This was his thing. He could actually make fire come out of his mouth. God knows why, but he did. Well, it was impressive. I mean, obviously there was other characteristics, manifesting stuff like. So he got the young Swami Rama, before he was Swami Rama, interest, and he went to his master, who was a true master, right? And there's something up there I gotta push away. And he told him about this. I'm going to go study with this guy because this guy's got power. I mean, what do you do, right? Just tell me all this stuff, and we ponder all these things, we meditate and stuff. But this guy breathes fire, and his teacher said, "Really, is that so? Take me to him. I'd like to talk to him." So he brings him to him. Turns out that this was one of his students many, many years ago. And he said to him, "You can breathe fire. That's pretty impressive." He said, "Yes." He said, "How long did it take you to learn that?" He said, 20 years to master that. He said, "Really? 20 years? If I want fire, I strike a match, and it only took me about 5 seconds to learn how to do it." Needless to say, the young boy went back with his master and completed it and became an enlightened being himself. But you get the point. They are a horrible distraction. Now you'll see events. There's one huge event that happens every year in India, where you see all these guys. I mean, this one guy, who he wraps his penis around a piece of wood and will hold people standing on it. Hundreds of pounds. You go, exactly what's the point? I mean, what's the point? But it is an absorption. The ego gets impressed with power. A lot of the law of attraction manifestation stuff is the ego really obsessed with power, getting what it wants. And so it's very seductive, this idea of having city powers, these esoteric powers. I can manifest anything. I can wave my hand and a Rolex watch will appear. We really want to have that stuff. But if you really did have it, right? I mean, it'd be like putting a machine gun in the hands of a madman and letting him loose in the middle of New York City. Although we're kind of doing that, aren't we? So no, it's not necessary. As a matter of fact, I would say avoid it. The people I admire, Ramana, Buddha, Nisargadatta, they didn't do that. Matter of fact, somebody even asked Nisargadatta about it once. Says, "Yeah, you can use it. You can do that stuff. It takes special training. If you want it, you can do that." No interest in it whatsoever, because it doesn't tell you who you are. It is an outward focusing, compensatory practice, right? Because the real gold is in the other direction. It is a complete absence of power. It is the letting go of all of those things. Sometimes there are those instances where they appear, like Christ. He wasn't seeking the power of healing. It just happened. And as you can tell, it never went to his head. Matter of fact, he'd tell people, "Don't tell anybody this happened." Of course they did, right? but then he'd say, don't tell anybody what happened. As a matter of fact, he even lamented about it. He said, "Yes, they come, but they come for the loaves and the fishes. They don't come for what I really have to offer them. They come because I relieve their pain. They don't come because they want to know the truth." And in one harsh moment, somebody came and he said, "Master, I want to follow you, but so I'm going to go home now. My father has died and I've got to attend to his burial, and then I'll be back to follow you." And his response was, "Let the dead bury their dead. Come and follow me." It's very harsh on the surface, but underneath you can see what he's talking about. It's like, don't bother. This isn't important. focus your attention on what is important. And if those kinds of powers arise, and those kinds of powers, a lot of times they do naturally arise, a sensitivity to others people, a feeling, knowing what they're feeling, knowing what they're thinking, always happens within the context of bringing out healing and a greater understanding. When I'm working with somebody, I know what they're feeling because I'm feeling it. But I don't see it as an esoteric thing. I simply see it as a natural function of compassion trying to bring about healing. So does that help you? Does that answer it for you, buddy? Paul Joseph, who recognizes the return and never having been away from the center? The center recognizes it. Right? Thank you, G. It was very, very, very helpful. Yes. The only thing that recognizes anything is the only thing that can recognize anything. Awareness, consciousness, beingness, knowingness, the I amness, whatever you care to call it. What else cognizes anything? So that which is cognizing the center is the center. That which is knowing the truth is the truth. That which knows you as you really are is you as you really are. That is the true being. That is the Buddha. That is the Christ mind. Perfect G, thanks from your wealth. Ava says, we are really in one space here, and although in different places. Claudia, thank you. Lots of love from Canada. Thank you, Eva. Thank you for the answer to Bo. Very helpful for me as well. Bo's question was somehow present in me, but I couldn't express it. Very grateful also to Bo for the question. Great. Thank you, G. From David and Elaine, your presence, wisdom appreciated. Looking forward to be in your presence in Victoria. I'm looking forward to doing it. Very much so. Had a nice turnout last time, and it's a beautiful facility overlooking the ocean. It's amazing. So it'd be really good to be there. I'll keep you all posted. And I am one of my students who's here today is invited me to come stay with them. She lives in the eastern side of France, right near the Germany, not far from Austria as well, or Switzerland. And I would really love to see if I could get some help organizing some things in Europe, because it's a whole lot easier to get around in Europe than it is around the United States. So I would really love the opportunity to get some things together there, if we can. So not attached to it. So anyway, good. Everything is slowed down. Said yes. Come to France, GP. Sav in Paris. Yes, I'm definitely planning on it. We'll see how it all works out. But the door has opened, and I'm going to do my best to walk through it. So, thank you all once again. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being Satsang. The living Satsang, the living inquiry, because that's what it is. It's your inquiry into yourself, and coming back to the place you've never ever left. And to just know that the awareness is beyond all opposites. So it doesn't matter what appears. The fact that it is appearing is the awareness, is it not? The very fact that something appears and you cognize it means you are the cognizer. You are the cognizing. You are the awareness. That's all you've ever been. That's all you ever could be. Namaste. Lovely people. Okay. Oops. Oh, up there. There